Welcome back to All the King's Men Live. I am Jesse Cohen. Joining me as she does every week, Carrlyn Bathe. How are you doing today, Carrlyn?
I'm doing well, Jesse. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. We also want to welcome in everybody watching on the King's Twitch channel, the YouTube channel, the Facebook page, or on Twitter. Welcome to All the King's Men Live. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the upcoming draft lottery, the King's history with the draft lottery, and as always, a look around social media roundup. But first, Carrlyn, we're going to start with another Would You Rather. This one was submitted to us last week in the chat.
Yes.
And it's a tough one.
It's tough.
So the question is, would you rather take a punch from Curtis McDermott or block a slap shot from Martin Firk? And I'll let you start off.
Aren't they the same thing?
I mean, I don't know.
The same velocity, the same speed, the same hard-hitting impact? Oh, my gosh. Okay. I thought hard about this, and I feel like with a punch from Curtis McDermott, you have a higher chance of breaking a bone in maybe this area, because this is where it's usually targeted, right?
Sure.
So to save this, I think if I were allowed to wear full goalie gear with like neck protect, everything, I'd take a slap shot from Martin Firk. I wouldn't want to do either of them, but like that's the choice that I would have to make. Because I can't unless they let me wear a cage and a helmet and didn't take it off. And I got in a fight.
You're putting rules and restrictions on this. I'm gonna go with the punch from Curtis McDermott.
Why?
Because I've been punched before.
Oh gosh.
And it hurts and it's not fun. But I know it's sort of like the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. So I know what it feels like to be punched. I have no idea what it feels like to absorb a 109.2 mile an hour slap shot. And I will rely on the subconscious mercy of Curtis McDermott not to cave my face in with his punch. Whereas I'm not entirely certain that Martin Firk has a ton of control over where the puck goes on a 109.2 mile an hour slap shot. So you could take that thing anywhere.
This is true.
And there are some dangerous spots that I would not want to, including my face.
I'd just face it head on. I'd put my helmet right now and be like,
yeah. So I'm gonna take the punch, like I said, but. Joining us now to answer this very important question and others from ESPN, Chris Peters. So, Chris, how are you doing today, first of all?
I'm doing well. I would not be doing well if I had to choose between either of those things, though.
No, but if you had to, which would you go with?
I think I'm going to go with the slap shot.
Wow, all right.
I'm going to hope he shanks it.
Yeah,
so,
well, I suppose that's,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Curtis McDermott's going to miss on the punch. I think there's a higher probability that Firk will miss me, although I'm a wide target, so who knows?
That's a fair point. I guess we should set up, how far away you are from the shot, and like Carrlyn mentioned, how much padding and protection do you get? But
yeah,
just the same as you said, neither one of those is an enticing option. So Chris, we're here to, the fans I guess win. Chris, we're here to talk to you about tomorrow's NHL Draft Lottery. Obviously, the rules have been explained multiple times by multiple people. We've got a video coming up in a bit to explain them again. But the real issue for me, Chris, is when people talk about prospects, they rank them in simple numerical order. And in every chapter of life, I have become tired of numerical rankings because it doesn't give you an idea of the gap between the numbers, right? If you say something's 1 through 10, there's got to be a number 2, there's got to be a number 3, but the gap between number 1 and number 2 could be twice as big as the gap between number 3 and number 4. So I'll ask you this right off the top. Is it a straight 1 through 10 ranking, or are there tiers or orbits of prospects available in this draft?
There's always tiers, and I think it's important I think that's always an important distinction. It's something that I try to do in my writing too, is just to kind of give a sample of where these guys stack up. But I mean, you look at this and you say, okay, well, Alexis Lafreniere, pretty clearly the consensus number 1 guy. There's certainly a few scouting services out there that have put a Quinton Byfield at 1, or sometimes you see a Tim Stützle at 2 and Byfield at 3. It just kind of depends. But I think that Lafreniere is heads above the pack at this point. I think he's the safest pick. He projects very favorably. He's got all the accolades. We've seen him at the World Junior level be dominant. We've seen him dominate at the junior level. He's probably the most NHL ready player in this draft as well. And then for me, there's a bit of a drop, and then it's Quinton Byfield. And I think he's such a high upside player where you're taking a bit of a risk because he still has a lot to grow his game. He's one of the youngest players in this draft as well, which I think actually improves his value. because he's almost a full year younger than Lafreniere. So that's where I see that there's a bit of separation between him and the pack. And then you kind of go a little bit further, and then it's Tim Stützle, Lucas Raymond, Cole Perfetti, Marco Rossi. I mean, like that, those guys are kind of grouped together for me. But I think there are always going to be tiers. And for me, the tier, if you're in the lottery range, you're in a really good position to land a potential impact prospect. If you're beyond that, I think you're starting to get into that area where it's going to be tougher to make some of those decisions. You're going to have to rely very heavily on your board, and just, everybody's going to have a different idea of who the best player available is. But I think if you're in that 1 through 10 range in particular, or 1 through 11 maybe, I think that's where you have a chance to make a huge splash in this draft.
You mentioned that Lafreniere has shown that he's clearly the I think you said the most NHL ready player available. What about his game makes him stand out so far above everyone else?
Well, I think there's a couple of different things. The one for me that makes him stand out above the rest is just his competitiveness, his ability to play the body, his physicality, his willingness to go to the hard areas of the ice. He initiates contact a lot. I think if you watch the World Juniors, you would see him really getting after the opposing defenseman on the forecheck and making it really difficult for them. I think that's something that can translate immediately to the NHL, given his size and physical strength. He also has a really good feel for the offensive zone, his ability to kind of, work the puck around. And then, he's got that ability to get to the middle of the ice as well as about anybody in this class, just because he has some power to his game. He's not a behemoth by any means, but he uses his size extremely well. And he's got the work ethic and the skill level combination that I think translates most immediately.
The kids getting drafted are obviously, they're 17, 18, 19, depending on how it goes. You mentioned that Byfield's almost a year older than Lafreniere. Am I saying it right, by the way, Lafreniere?
Lafreniere? Yep. Okay. Lafreniere, yep.
Hockey isn't completely reliant on body size or height or weight, but I could imagine that at that age, that can shift dramatically over a period of time. Does it matter that someone like Byfield is a larger specimen than Lafreniere? Is there any expectation that might shift, rapidly over time?
I think it matters because he's taller, he's heavier, he's as we mentioned, younger, so there's a chance for him to even become bigger and stronger. And he's also a very quick player. I mean, at that size, you have to still be able to play. I think that Lafreniere's skills are a little bit further ahead than where Byfield's are, but I still think that Byfield has very projectable traits in the skill department. But I think when you're looking at size, it can be a benefit. It doesn't necessarily make a huge difference in the evaluation. I think you're just looking to see, kind of where these players stack up. I think what matters more is probably the positional bias. Where Byfield's a center and Lafreniere is a wing. So those are kind of the situations that you have, or the different things that you have to look at and reevaluate and just see, what do you value more? And I think that the size of Byfield is one of the things that makes him an especially attractive player, but I think it's the total package and the upside that kind of comes with a player of that size and athletic ability and just strength at such a young age. So there's a lot of different things that come into play, but certainly it can be a separating factor between two prospects when they're close.
Jesse and Chris, I've got a question here from the chat. Nav W3 asks, are there any sleepers in this draft, Chris, that you think aren't being talked about enough right now?
Oh, wow. Yeah. The sleepers. Well, this is kind of a weird draft because I feel like there are so many wide ranging opinions about different players that can kind of, slide in here and there. And everybody seems to have a kind of a different definition of a sleeper, and I think sleepers, guys that could provide value in the later rounds or the middle rounds. One guy that I've talked about quite a bit this year as a sleeper is Declan Carlisle, who's a defenseman at Merrimack College. And he is an interesting player. He's eligible, second year eligible for the draft. Didn't get a lot of love last year. Didn't necessarily deserve it, but we saw this year at Merrimack, he played top pairing minutes. He played against top competition. There are still some flaws in his game, but he's very good defensively. He keeps a good gap. Some good offensive ability. Made the Hockey East All-Rookie team this year. I think the responsibility that he was given on a team that doesn't have a lot of depth and plays in a particularly difficult conference. I was really impressed with what I saw over a live viewing and some additional video viewings of him kind of standing out. So that's a mid-range, middle to late round pick that I think, that's the kind of guy that you would eventually have to pay more for as a potential college free agent. So those second and third year eligible guys that are in this draft, those are guys that I think could be really interesting in those later rounds, and you might be able to get some more bang for your buck in those late round picks.
It seems to be, I don't want to say common knowledge, but oft-repeated phrase not to take a goalie in the first round, and yet every time I look at the top 10 rankings, there's that goalie. I'm blanking on his name at the moment, but I believe he's from Russia.
Yeah, Yaroslav Askarov.
That's the one. Thank you.
Yeah.
What's the ceiling on him? Like, could he go top 5? Is he that good?
I think he is. I think that it just kind of comes down to the fact that this is that top 10 has depth. It has really good forwards in particular. And so it just comes down to how much risk are you willing to take? There's always a level of risk with a goaltender. It's one of the hardest positions to project. Some teams have invested in goalie specific scouts that have kind of helped narrow that gap a little bit, but it is a difficult thing to do because it's such a mental position as well. So you throw in the Russian factor, the fact that he's also a right catch goalie, which makes him a bit of an oddity in that regard, because I think all time there's only been about 10% of the goalies that caught with their right hand, which is kind of typical of the population that is left-handed naturally. But still, it's just interesting. It's one of those things. But for me, I've been doing this, either covering prospects specifically or working in junior hockey for over 10 years. And there really hasn't been a goalie. A lot of people have said he's the best since Carey Price. I kind of buy into that because I've seen him at his very best. When he's at his best, it's hard for me to say that there's definitely no goalie better in this draft. And it's hard for me to say that even some of the skaters are better, because I think he can change the game. And it's such a valuable position, which is why it's you have to get that pick right. And if there is a team that ends up in the top 5 in the lottery, based on however the lottery shakes out, they're going to have a decision to make. Is it best player available? And it could be him for some teams. It very well could be. But I think, there's going to be kind of some hesitation just because of the goaltending factor, the fact that he is Russian, he is under contract at St. Petersburg, which is a place where, they could potentially extend him, and you don't know how long you're going to have. So this is one draft where there's so much talent. I could see a team just kind of passing on the risk. But for me, he's one of the best I've seen. I saw Vasilevsky, I saw, recent Spencer Knight last year, who went in the first round. I think that where Askarov is right now, I feel like he is better than those guys were at the same age. He's had some tough moments. The World Juniors, he didn't play very well. Didn't play very well in the under-18 Five Nations, but he essentially won Russia the Hlinka Gretzky Cup in the beginning of the year. He got them to the silver medal game, beating a much heavily favored USA team that had Jack Hughes and Trevor Zegras and Alex Turcotte and all those guys, and basically single-handedly beat the U.S. So when you see a player like that, and you see him at the top level, that's a kind of guy that I feel a little more comfortable taking the risk on, even though he is a goaltender.
Another question here.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, from chat. Aperture is asking, do you see any specific player possibly making a big jump? I don't know if you just answered it kind of right there with Yaroslav, because on Sportsnet, he's listed as, number 12 in the rankings. Is that someone maybe you would consider making that big jump like you both were talking about, like cracking the top 5 or something like that if a team needed him? Or is there another player that you feel like could possibly make a big jump up like that?
It could be him. I think one of the other guys that's been getting a lot of buzz and was really before, we had to stop the season, is Jake Sanderson, defenseman from the U.S. national team program. It's been thought that Jamie Drysdale is the number 1 defenseman in this draft by a lot of people. And I had them back to back in my own rankings. So, and I had Drysdale just a little bit ahead, but I think Sanderson is starting to convince more people that he should be higher up. Now he's a better all-around defenseman, certainly better defensively. Both of them are great skaters, but Sanderson is a much more is a faster and more powerful skater. He's more physical, he's bigger, and stronger. So I mean, those are the types of things. He's a guy that has been talked about throughout the year. He kind of started the season in maybe like the low 20s range for a lot of people, and he's clearly a top 10 guy now. And very well, I know there are people that feel very strongly about him going even higher than that. And we could see him be one of those guys that sneaks into the first 6 picks or so ahead of some of these forwards that have been more highly regarded for a longer period of time. So he's a guy that I'm watching very closely as a potential riser to go even further higher than even I had them.
Well, Chris, we appreciate you joining us. After the draft lottery happens tomorrow at 5 p.m., moving forward, we're going to start taking a closer look at some of these prospects, getting into more in-depth scouting reports. So we may, in fact, be having you back on if you'll join us in the future.
Yeah, anytime. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Chris.
And as we promised earlier, here's that video explaining just how the draft lottery works.
The 2020 NHL Draft Lottery happens on June 26th. And the most important thing is, how will this affect your Los Angeles Kings? 24 teams will participate in the NHL Stanley Cup qualifiers, which leaves 7 teams that will take part in Phase 1 of the lottery. Right now, the LA Kings sit in the 4th spot, behind Detroit, Ottawa, and Ottawa. Each team has decreasing odds at receiving either the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd pick. Now, this is all normal, but the real change comes with the addition of the qualifier teams. In Phase 1, 8 teams from the qualifiers are represented as unassigned picks. If one of those teams wins the lottery, the NHL will hold a Phase 2 with only the 8 eliminated teams who all have equal odds at winning. But for the Kings, the focus is on Phase 1. LA has a 9.5% chance at the number 1 pick, and a slightly higher, just slightly better shot at picks 2 and 3. Worst case scenario, 3 teams below LA grab the top 3 spots, and the Kings fall to 7th overall. Best case, LA jumps 3 spots to claim the 1st overall pick. It's that simple. So on June 26th, sit back, relax, and believe.
So that was yet another explanation of how the NHL Draft Lottery works here on All the Kings Men Live. Support for All the Kings Men Live comes from Manscaped. Manscaped is an official partner of the LA Kings. Thanks to this revolutionary company, manscaping accidents are a thing of the past. Just get yourself the Manscaped Perfect Package 3.0. Inside, you'll find products like their Lawnmower 3.0, which is advanced skin-safe technology, so this trimmer won't cut you. Everything you need to keep trimmed and smelling nice is in the Perfect Package 3.0. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code KINGSMEN at manscaped.com. That's one word. Go to manscaped.com, use the word Kingsmen. Now, Carrlyn, you and I fall on opposite ends of the pessimist-optimist spectrum. And the Kings, yeah, I think we do.
Okay.
maybe deep down inside we're on the same side, but I think externally it manifests itself in different ways. Mm-hmm. But the draft lottery is tomorrow at 5 p.m. The Kings could finish anywhere from 1st overall for the first time in franchise history, all the way down to 7th overall, which would be disappointing, but not a terrible pick, hopefully, based on what Chris Peters was just telling us.
Yeah.
But I see a lot of Kings fans online, and I grant you it's a self-selecting sample size. I'm seeing a lot of pessimism, whether it's on Reddit or Facebook or Twitter or the message boards. And I see a lot of people saying, yeah, brace yourself for number 7. But I wanted to remind people, Carrlyn, that the Kings' history with the NHL Draft Lottery is actually not as terrible as one might think. So it goes back to 1995, the very first draft lottery ever held, and the Kings actually won that lottery. Now, they didn't get the 1st overall pick because back then you could only move up 4 spots, but the Kings went from 7th overall to 3rd overall, and they drafted Aki Peteriberg, who at the time I believe was the highest drafted Finnish player in NHL history. Now, Berg would go on to play, sorry, I'm pulling up his stats here real quick, over 200 games with the Kings, 281 games. He scored 43 points in his 5 seasons with the Kings. He wound up being traded to Toronto for Adam Mayer and a draft pick that wound up being Michael Camilleri. And if you track Michael Camilleri's trade history through the twists and turns of trade trees, if you've seen Steve Dangle's video on it, the Camilleri trade winds up netting the Kings both Justin Williams and Dustin Penner through all the different permutations of trading picks and moving around in the draft. So you could look at it as the Kings winning the first ever NHL draft lottery, resulting in winning the Stanley Cup twice. So
exactly.
That's not terrible.
That's a long, twisty, windy road.
It is.
Way to look at it.
Yeah, I'm trying to be optimistic here.
Yeah.
So that was 1995. Now the draft lottery winds up not impacting the Kings in 96 or 97. They make the playoffs in 98, so they're not in that draft lottery. In 99, they trade away their first-round pick in the Ziggy Palffy trade, so no impact there. They make the playoffs in 2000, 2001, and 2002. 2004, if I'm not mistaken, it doesn't wind up impacting the Kings. That brings us to 2005, where every team entered a 30-team draft lottery. The Kings wind up taking Anze Kopitar with the number 11 pick.
Yep.
I'd say that worked out pretty well.
If you honestly, Jesse, if you look at any pick within the last, 15 years, like starting from Kopitar and up, there's no one to be mad about. If they're not number,
I wouldn't go that far.
Well, okay. It's not that there's no one to be mad about. Let me rephrase that. There's a lot of players to be happy about that were not the number one overall pick.
I think that's a much better way to look at it. Yeah.
Like, are you mad about Drew Doughty?
Not at all. Not at all.
Are you mad about? Well, I know we no longer have like a Tanner Pearson or a Derek Forbort, but were you mad about that? No. Are you mad about Adrian Kempe? No. Are you mad about Rasmus Kupari? Are you mad about Gabe Vilardi? No.
I'm sorry. I got to push back on the Forbort one only because Tarasenko was taken right after him. So that one could have turned out.
Okay. That might be a little bit, but no.
But your point is well taken.
There is so much positivity to be taken from the draft in general. You're getting a good crop of players to choose from in general. So the fact that people put so much emphasis on the number one overall, a team's not doomed because of it. In fact, there are some teams that have been doomed because of it, and they've been given the number one overall pick, and look where they are. So there's so much positivity. Like, I guess I do. I am the optimist.
See, you're the optimist.
I am the optimist. I am.
I mean, obviously, the most recent experience with the lottery last season was disappointing for Kings fans because they dropped down to 5th. But, I think everybody's perfectly happy with the pick of Alex Turcotte.
Of course.
Going back 2 seasons to the 2017 draft, the Kings again dropped down to 11, but they wind up with Gabe Vilardi.
Are we mad about it?
I'm not. Just like the Kopitar pick, I think the Kings prosper as a result of a player who should have gone higher in the draft falling to them. Now with Vilardi, obviously, there were the health questions, and probably a lot of teams passed on him because of them. With Kopitar, I think, honestly, it was just because he was from Slovenia, and I don't think there had been a Slovenian hockey player at that, or professional hockey player at that point. But either way, to your point, it just goes to show that talented players can come at any pick in the draft. Dustin Brown was 13th overall. I think Jeff Carter was also, no, he couldn't have been 11th, but I think he might have been 13th. Drew Doughty was 2nd. Jonathan Quick was, a 3rd-round pick. Kyle Clifford was a 2nd-round pick. Trevor Lewis was a 1st-round pick. So, it just goes to show you need to build a franchise, not just rely on that 1st overall pick. Having said that, I would be very excited, Carrlyn, if the Kings got the 1st overall pick tomorrow.
I mean, after hearing what Chris Peters had to say, I'd be pretty excited too, honestly.
Yeah.
And he's one of those players too that, say if you're already stacked at that position, and maybe you don't need that kind of depth, you still go with Lafreniere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's, wow. Yeah. It'd be special if the Kings got that and were able to pick him.
Yeah. Everybody knows about the Kings' defensive and goaltending and center depth. On the wing, I guess you've got Kaliev, who's very exciting, and you've got Fagemo. But other than that, I think most of us are relying on players to transition to wing from center, whether it's, Jared Anderson-Dolan or Akil Thomas, or maybe a Vilardi or a Madden or a Turcotte, one of those guys. They have a ton of center depth. Other than Luc Robitaille, I'm not sure that the Kings have ever really had like an elite world-class. I'm sure someone is screaming at me right now as I say this, but
yeah, another left winger to do.
Yeah. But I mean, there's a ton of like Granato, Sandstrom's, Curry's, Justin Williams, Dustin Brown, right? Really good top tier wingers, but not like, top 100 players in NHL history kind of elite talent at the wing.
He could be like another Luc Robitaille.
I mean, hopefully.
Yeah.
So anyway, that is the history of the LA Kings with the NHL Draft Lottery. We are going to bring you another word from our sponsor right now, and then we'll come back.
One all, one shot, now the future is yours. Go!
I find the light at the end of the tunnel.
All right, that was another word from Manscaped. Now, Carrlyn, it's time for a look around the world of social media for a social media roundup.
I was just saying, I don't even know if I was live yet, but I was elaborating on our optimism and pessimism round. I was like, I find the light at the end of the tunnel. Jesse, I really do. I try my best. Okay, so in the social media roundup this week, we're going to start with NHL.com staff voting Luc Robitaille the best to ever wear number 20. I mean, Kings fans are going to agree with that. He was up against Ed Belfour, and one other player. And I mean, come on, Jesse, number 20, best to ever wear it, Luc Robitaille. I mean, I know you're biased, but like.
No, I am heavily biased. And I'll allow a tiny little peek into my personal psychosis. When I was a kid, I had Luc Robitaille's jersey. I had his poster on my wall. I love Luc Robitaille. I don't like hero worship. I don't like, the idea of raising individuals above everybody else, generally speaking. But Luc Robitaille is the exception for me. He was my childhood hero, so much so that anytime you hear me criticizing Alexander Ovechkin or questioning why we fed him so much, I will admit right now freely that it is entirely because I'm scared that he might one day eclipse Luc Robitaille in the minds of hockey fans as the greatest left wing to ever play the game. So there you have it. I
was going to say,
wildly approve of this selection.
As someone who grew up a really big fan of Luc too, how does it feel to work for someone like him? I mean, you guys are colleagues now. Is that crazy?
Completely surreal. I'll just tell a quick personal anecdote. I went to a rain game. I bumped into a friend of mine. It was shortly after I'd made the transition from freelancing for the Kings to working for the Kings. And they were asking me, how does it feel? Is it great? Is it everything you wished for? And out of the corner of my eye, I saw Luc coming down the concourse, maybe 100 yards away. And so I started talking to her, doing a bit of a Shaggy Dog story. And I said, if you honestly want to know the greatest part of this job, I said, watch this. And Luc got, within, 10 or 15 feet of me and, to the point where I knew he'd see me. And we made eye contact and we just did the little, like, hey, little quick hand wave and just head nod. And he looked at me and said, hey, how you doing, buddy? And walked on. And I just looked at my friend and said, that's it right there. That's it. That's it.
What a guy.
Yeah.
What a guy.
I shouldn't say this out loud because maybe they won't, but you could stop paying me and I would do it just for that interaction.
Just for the head nod from Luc.
That's it. That's all I need.
It is that cool, though. It is. It is.
I'm incredibly lucky. We're all incredibly lucky.
We really are. We're blessed. Next up, we've got a picture that Anze Kopitar posted wishing his father a happy Father's Day. A great picture of Papa Kopi smiling all big right there. I mean, what a guy this guy is. We see him all over the rink at TSPC whenever he's in town. And Jesse, I hear me out. If he's talking behind you, doesn't it sound like Anze Kopitar is behind you? Like their voices indistinguishable. Like they're the same person to me. They're the same person.
Yeah, and I have to confess, I love when a player has a coach for a dad.
That's it.
But I just want to know whose hand that is in the picture holding that phone.
Oh yeah,
That's all.
I didn't even see that.
Yeah.
I didn't even see that. Oh my gosh. Next up, we've got some Jonathan Quick fan art. Okay, and this is from Spitz Designs, and it's a collab with Northern Artwork, Jesse. And I looked into both of these accounts here. One of them is a graphic design intern with Golden Gophers hockey, and the other one is studying sports media at Ryerson.
Wow.
If these two humans are just still in school or interning, someone needs to hire these people because look at the freaking quality of this artwork right here. I am blown away. Jesse, this is the kind of art you see being sold at Staples Center. This is the kind of art someone would buy custom online. I mean, what are your thoughts on this? It's a beautiful masterpiece.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I'm constantly jealous of people who can create something like that. When I was a kid, I would doodle, and I had friends tell me like, "Oh, you should explore that more," and I never did. I have a friend who's a professional artist, and I constantly admire him for his talent, and he gets mad at me and says it's not talent, it's practice. He says that, he puts a ton of work into it. And so he's constantly annoyed when people dismiss it as just God-given talent. But I look at something like this and I just can't imagine you could give me a lifetime of practice. And I don't think I could replicate something like that. It's really impressive.
Unbelievable. And it's not just like one face, like 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
4. I'm gonna have 4 different it's unbelievable.
I'm gonna make one tiny nitpick though.
Uh-oh.
And it happens a lot.
The art critic's coming out.
No, it's not. It has nothing to do with the art of it.
Okay.
It bugs me at the Kings offices too. You see there's 2 Stanley Cups in the picture there?
Yeah.
Well, the Kings haven't won 2 Stanley Cups. They've won the Stanley Cup on 2 separate occasions. There's not, I'm sorry, but that's the whole point of the trophy is that there's one and it gets passed on. That's just a minor thing for me. I try and make sure that when I talk about having won the cup that I never say, oh, they've won 2 cups, they've won 3 cups, whatever. I try and say they won the cup however many times they've done it because in my mind, there's only 1 cup, even though technically there are 3. There's 2 replicas, but there's supposed to be only 1. So anyway, but nonetheless,
it's like
beautiful,
a tiny
beautiful
bowl,
piece of work.
and then there's 2 statuesque looking ones.
Right.
One that stays in the hall, one that travels around. Oh my gosh. I think of it like tally marks. So it's like we won. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying. There's different ways to say it for sure. We're going to remember what you just said about the 2 cups, and I will bring that up again later on in the social media roundup. So remember that. Okay. Remember that. Next up, we've got fans receiving their masks from the Kings, and it's terrifying. Okay, we've got a Bailey mask showcase here. Have you seen a Drew Doughty mask? Is that floating around too? With the toothless grin?
They're really upsetting.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on these, and would you wear one?
I would. I think that hopefully, I don't want to project out too far, but I mean, Halloween is only 4 months away, whatever it is. I could imagine the Drew Doughty mask coming in handy on Halloween, and who knows what Halloween will look like this year. But it's a pretty good tool for freaking people out, I think, if they're not expecting it. But the Bailey one is funny. I like the Bailey one. The Bailey one is pretty funny. We've got some reaction here in chat, and the 13th Seahawk says, "Oh my God, it's me." Are one of those photos of you? Wow. Okay. And they're loving it, saying you look awesome. Lowly says, at this rate, Halloween is next week. Honestly, what day is it? We don't even know. Well, actually, we do know because on Thursdays we do this show, and that's all we know. This is our marker for the week. But I know what day it is. It's the day before the draft lottery. That's what day.
There we go. And Aperture says these are hilarious. The Dewey one is so good. I think they're scary, but I love them, and I would definitely buy one. And would definitely get probably some stares at the supermarket, which I'm okay with. Next up, we've got
Happy Father's Day,
Jeff
Juan.
Carter.
Thanks for being a great human
sending
being.
out some
You're a
Father's
great
Day
man. You bring light
messages
into
to
this world.
fans. Fans were paying for messages custom from Jeff Carter
Happy
for their
Father's Day,
fathers on
Juan.
Father's Day.
Thanks for being
All
a
of the
great human
proceeds
being.
benefited
You're a great
Wags
man.
and
You bring
Walks,
light
which
into this
him and
world.
his wife Megan are heavily involved in. And we've got a video
Happy
for you
Father's
to
Day,
see
Juan.
one of the
Thanks for
messages
being a great
that
human
was
being.
sent out
You're a
to
great
one
man.
of the
You bring
dads
light
on this
into this
Father's
world.
Day.
Happy Father's Day, Juan.
Somewhere.
Thanks for being.
Yeah,
a
it's
great
playing right
human
now.
being. You're a
Not
great
sure.
man.
Not
You
sure
bring
if people
light
can
into
hear
this
it or
world.
not because you and I
We can't hear it.
Otherwise, we'd get description. But the takeaway for me, besides the money going to Wags and Walks, which is a great charity, is just look at that beard. And I mean,
It's
I know
huge.
I've been growing my my quarantine goatee. I've been trying to keep it contained on the sides, but that is a Jeff Carter playoff beard, and I always forget just how majestic some of them can get. Jeff
It's
Carter
a
does it
healthy
again.
beard.
It really is.
That's a healthy. There's nothing patchy about it. It's like he has your goatee times like 40, just
Mhm.
around like all around his cheeks, and there's some depth in there.
There's a little more Stanley Cup silver in mine than in his, but he'll catch up, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, next up, we've got Willie Mitchell and Milan Lucic out on Tofino Marina on Willie's boat. King
Mhm.
size is the name of the boat. And Jesse, let's bring this back up here because there's 2 cups here.
Yeah.
And I know it's taking place of the I in both king and size. Do you think this is the same kind of faux pas as the other 2
Not
cups
at all.
in the picture?
No, I'm fine with it because this one is just a a logo, and the I in King has 2012 on it, and the I in size has 2014 on it, and it's I don't know if wordplay is exactly the right phrase, but it's naming a boat. Boat names are usually sort of clever, fun little plays on words. They have puns in them, whatever. So I'm fine with king size in this setting with the two Stanley Cups, or with the Stanley Cup represented twice, I should say. So yeah, I like it. I'm just stunned that it's 2020 and we're just now finding out about Willie Mitchell's boat name. I don't know how long he's had the boat, but I feel like it must have been a while.
Share with us. Oh, by the way, my pajama pants. I'm like literally like I put my leg up and I'm like, oh God, wearing pajama pants, everyone. What was your reaction when you saw this? Because you said, I didn't even know he had this boat. Like I didn't know that was on the back of the boat. Like what a revelation there. What was your reaction? Can you share it with the viewers?
I felt happy that his time in LA meant so much to him. That it's on his boat permanently. So now every time anybody up in Vancouver sees Willie Mitchell, they'll remember that the Kings won the Stanley Cup twice and Vancouver has still yet to win it. So the fact that Willie's up there being himself, sticking it to Vancouver fans, that makes me happy on multiple levels.
Now we need to see Toffoli on his boat to then bring more anger to Vancouver fans. Just the two of them, king size on the back. I think that'd be a good pick next for Willie. Next up here, we've got Meatball again. Yep. And I'm happy anytime there's a Meatball mention in virtually anything. And this time, it looks like Meatball's in the doghouse. He puked on Matt Luff's bed because he can.
Yeah.
And I know you have a special name for the types of photos with the dogs.
Yeah, well, it's not my name. It's look, I'm a cranky old man who likes to yell at clouds. So generally speaking, when slang words enter the lexicon, I tend to crinkle my nose up at them. I don't like them unless they were around when I was a kid. But when you have a picture of a pet or an animal sticking its tongue out like Meatball is doing in this picture here, it's known as a blep, BLEP, and that's a new word that's sprung up on the internet in different forms and everything. And I happen to love the word. I'm not a huge fan of all the other words that are in the same category as blep. There's doggo for dogs or catto for cats. Not a huge fan of baby talk amongst adults, but blep is a perfect word that describes something that pet owners have experienced, forever. I had 4 cats and 2 dogs growing up, and there were plenty of bleps to be seen. But I didn't know we didn't have a word for it. We had to say, oh, look, Rudy's tongue is out. Or look, Jenny's got her tongue. It's cute. Look at that. But this, he just said, I had a dog named Jenny.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, we had 2 dogs, Jenny and Kaibab, and 4, at one point, 4 cats, Fox, Chicken, Rudy, and Slippers. And so there you go. Tons of bleps.
I think people need to go to you on Twitter if they ever have trouble naming their animals, because you've got some pretty spectacular names right there.
Well, and to be fair, Chicken was actually Chicken 2, Chicken TOO, not Chicken 2, because we had another cat that looked exactly like Chicken 2 named Chicken, and when Chicken passed, we went out and got Chicken 2. But anyway.
My gosh, Jesse. Okay, chat right now is loving it right now. Loli says it's the first time he's heard the word. Loli, it was the first time I heard the word the other day. Because Jesse, you actually called Meatball Meat Blep, like as a new word. You're like, yep, that's Meat Blep, and I was like, what the heck's a blep? And then we learned, and now everyone else learns. Pinky says her dog Frappy bleps a lot when he sleeps. That sounds adorable. And then Loli came back saying, such great names. I agree. I think you've got some really good names for your pets, Jesse. That was really cute.
And I had a hamster called Applesauce, because when she slept, she looked like a little ball of applesauce. So
Are you kidding me? Oh, my heart! Applesauce! That's so cute! Oh, my God! Oh, that's going to do it for the social media roundup. And I know we have a special send-off video before we completely end the show. And did you want to wrap that up for everybody? Do we have to go?
We do, unfortunately. That's the end of social media roundup. And as you said, that is the end of all the Kingsmen Live. But Kings fans, tomorrow, immediately following the NHL Draft Lottery, Carrlyn won't be joining us, unfortunately, but I will be here live with you to react to the NHL Draft Lottery, hopefully celebrating the #1 overall pick, or I suppose celebrating the 2nd overall pick, or I guess celebrating the 3rd overall pick, or
it's gonna be okay, Jesse.
Having no reaction at all to the 4th.
No, it's gonna be okay. It's going to be okay. You yourself told us about the Kings draft history, and it sounded beautiful to me. Okay?
Well, hopefully, like I said, we will be celebrating here tomorrow at 5:30 immediately following the NHL Draft Lottery. But before we go, finally, Bailey wanted to weigh in on the possibilities of tomorrow's draft lottery.
And the next card revealed by Deputy Commissioner Bill Daley is the winner of the NHL Draft Lottery.
The first overall selection in the NHL Draft belongs to the Los Angeles Kings.
On June 26th, sit back, relax, and believe.